Do you want to successfully complete the C211 Objective Assessment exam? Then you are in the right place. Our website provides a list of questions and answers for your success in the C211 OA exam for free. We understand that acing your OA exam can be quite challenging. That's why we provide completely free exam guides and practice questions for you. In this video, we will cover questions from international trade theories, institutional frameworks, foreign direct investment, foreign market entry, and global competitive dynamics. So, let's get started. 1. A technology startup expanding to Southeast Asia discovers that written contracts are frequently superseded by relationship-based agreements among local business partners. Which theoretical perspective best explains why this firm must adapt to informal business practices? A. Resource-based view framework. B. Diamond theory of competitiveness. C. Institution-based view of business. D. Product life cycle theory. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Institution-based view of business. Explanation. Option C is correct because the institution-based view emphasizes that firms must understand and adapt to both formal rules and informal norms that govern business behavior in different countries. Option A is incorrect because the resource-based view focuses on leveraging valuable internal capabilities and assets rather than explaining how external norms shape business conduct. Option B is incorrect because diamond theory addresses national competitive advantages in specific industries rather than explaining the role of informal practices in business relationships. Option D is incorrect because product life cycle theory explains how trade patterns shift over time based on production stages rather than cultural or institutional factors. All right, let's tackle a question that gets at the heart of how businesses operate across borders. The scenario describes a tech startup in Southeast Asia discovering that formal written contracts take a backseat to relationship-based agreements. This is a textbook example of what we call the institution-based view of business. Think of institutions as the rules of the game. But here's the thing, those rules aren't just written laws. They include unwritten social customs, expectations, and norms that vary wildly from country to country. The institution-based view tells us that success abroad requires understanding both the formal regulations and these informal practices. The resource-based view, that's about your internal strengths, your patents, your talent, your brand. Diamond theory explains why certain industries thrive in certain nations. Product life cycle theory tracks how production shifts geographically as products mature. None of those explain why a startup must adapt to local relationship customs. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When you see questions about adapting to local business customs, norms, or informal practices, think institution-based view immediately. The quick recall hook: institutions equals rules equals both formal and informal. 2. When a pharmaceutical company enters a new country and must navigate complex drug approval regulations, licensing requirements, and safety documentation mandates, which institutional pillar primarily governs these compliance obligations that the company must satisfy? A. Regulatory pillar through government power. B. Cognitive pillar through shared beliefs. C. Normative pillar through social values. D. Cultural pillar through traditions. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Regulatory pillar through government power. Explanation. Option A is correct because the regulatory pillar represents the coercive power of governments to establish and enforce laws, regulations, and mandatory compliance requirements that firms must follow. Option B is incorrect because the cognitive pillar refers to internalized, taken-for-granted values and beliefs that guide behavior, rather than formal government mandates and enforcement mechanisms. Option C is incorrect because the normative pillar concerns how social norms and peer expectations influence behaviour rather than legally binding government regulations and approval processes. Option D is incorrect because the cultural pillar is not a recognised institutional pillar in the framework, which consists specifically of regulatory, normative, and cognitive components. Let's dig into the three institutional pillars that govern business behaviour. A pharmaceutical company entering a new country faces drug approval regulations, licensing requirements, and safety documentation mandates. These are government-imposed obligations with real consequences for non-compliance. This describes the regulatory pillar, the coercive arm of institutions. Governments write laws, create agencies, and enforce penalties. You follow the rules or face fines, license revocation, or worse. The cognitive pillar is completely different. It's about internalised beliefs and assumptions people hold without questioning them. The normative pillar deals with social expectations and peer pressure, what's considered appropriate behaviour in a profession or community. Notice the question mentions complex drug approval regulations and licensing requirements. These are formal mandates with enforcement teeth, not social expectations or internalised beliefs. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When exam questions mention laws, regulations, government agencies, or mandatory compliance, that's regulatory pillar territory. Quick recall hook. Regulatory equals rules with teeth, governments that can bite. 3. A multinational enterprise observes that a formerly communist nation is privatizing state-owned industries, establishing property rights protections, and creating new regulatory agencies. Which concept best describes these comprehensive changes affecting how businesses operate there? A. Semi-globalization process. B. Market commonality shift. C. Liability of foreignness. D. Institutional transitions. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, D. Institutional transitions. Explanation. Option D is correct because institutional transitions are defined as fundamental and comprehensive changes introduced to the formal and informal rules of the game that affect organisations as players. Option A is incorrect because semi-globalization describes the middle ground between complete isolation and total globalization in international business rather than domestic rule changes. Option B is incorrect because market commonality refers to the overlap between two rival firms' markets in competitive analysis rather than changes in national economic systems. Option C is incorrect because liability of foreignness describes the inherent disadvantages foreign firms face in host countries rather than fundamental changes to a country's institutional environment. Here's a scenario about big changes happening in a formerly communist nation: privatization of state industries, new property rights protections, and regulatory agencies being created from scratch. This describes institutional transitions. Institutional transitions are fundamental, comprehensive changes to both formal and informal rules that affect how organizations operate as players in that country. Think of it as the entire game being rewritten, not just a rule tweak. Semi-globalization describes where the world sits between isolation and total integration. It's about the degree of global connectedness, not domestic rule changes. Market commonality is a competitive analysis term, measuring how much two rival firms overlap in the markets they serve. Liability of foreignness describes disadvantages foreign companies face simply because they're outsiders. None of those capture what's happening when a nation overhauls its economic and legal foundations. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe countries changing their fundamental economic systems, privatization, new property rights, new regulatory structures, that's institutional transitions. Quick recall hook. Transitions equals transformation of the entire playing field. 4. During contract negotiations with an overseas supplier, a procurement manager learns that this supplier has previously misrepresented product quality to other buyers to gain short-term advantages. Which institutional concept best describes this supplier behavior pattern? A. Transaction cost reduction. B. Opportunism and self-interest seeking. C. Cognitive pillar influence. D. Institutional framework compliance. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. B. Opportunism and self-interest seeking. Explanation. Option B is correct because opportunism is defined as self-interest seeking behavior, which includes deceptive practices like misrepresentation that institutions aim to constrain and prevent in business. Option A is incorrect because transaction cost reduction refers to minimizing the costs of conducting economic exchanges rather than describing deceptive behavior patterns in business relationships. Option C is incorrect because cognitive pillar influence refers to internalized values and beliefs guiding behavior rather than deliberate misrepresentation for self-interested gain. Option D is incorrect because institutional framework compliance means following established rules and norms rather than engaging in deceptive practices that violate business ethics. This question presents a supplier who has misrepresented product quality to gain short-term advantages. The term for this behavior is opportunism, self-interest seeking with guile, as economists put it. Opportunism includes lying, cheating, misrepresenting information, and breaking promises when it serves someone's interests. Institutions exist partly to constrain this behavior through contracts, reputations, and legal penalties. Transaction cost reduction is about minimizing the expenses of doing business: search costs, negotiation costs, enforcement costs. The cognitive pillar refers to deeply held beliefs and assumptions, not deliberate deception. Institutional framework compliance means following the rules, which is the opposite of what this supplier is doing. The key here is the phrase misrepresented product quality to gain short-term advantages. That's textbook opportunistic behavior. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When exam questions describe deception, misrepresentation, or cheating for self-gain in business relationships, that's opportunism. Quick recall hook. Opportunism equals self-interest with deception. They're playing dirty. 5. A foreign investor hesitates to enter a country where court decisions are unpredictable and contracts are difficult to enforce. This investor concern illustrates which primary function that well-developed institutions are designed to perform. A. Reducing uncertainty for participants. B. Maximizing government tax revenues. C. Eliminating all business competition. D. Guaranteeing profitability for firms. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer: A. Reducing uncertainty for participants. Explanation. Option A is correct because a key function of institutions is to reduce uncertainty by establishing clear rules that allow businesses to predict outcomes and plan effectively. Option B is incorrect because while governments collect taxes, the primary function of institutions is not revenue maximization, but creating predictable environments for economic activity. Option C is incorrect because institutions do not aim to eliminate competition, but to establish fair rules under which competition occurs in a predictable manner. Option D is incorrect because institutions establish rules and reduce uncertainty, but cannot guarantee profitability, which depends on firm strategy and market conditions beyond institutional control. A foreign investor hesitates to enter a country with unpredictable court decisions and weak contract enforcement. This fear points directly to a primary function of institutions: reducing uncertainty. When institutions work properly, businesses can predict what will happen. Contracts will be honoured, property will be protected, courts will rule consistently. Without this predictability, companies can't plan effectively, and investment dries up. Maximising government tax revenue isn't why institutions exist, though governments do collect taxes. Eliminating competition. Institutions don't do that. They create fair rules under which competition happens. Guaranteeing profitability? No institution can promise that. Market conditions and business strategy determine profits, not institutional rules. The scenario describes uncertainty about outcomes, which is exactly what good institutions eliminate. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe business hesitation due to unpredictable legal outcomes or weak enforcement, the answer involves institutions reducing uncertainty. Quick recall hook. Institutions reduce uncertainty. They make the game predictable. 6. An international finance manager notices that a basket of consumer goods costs significantly more in one country than another when prices are converted at current exchange rates. Which economic theory suggests that exchange rates should eventually adjust to equalize these price differences? A. Strategic trade theory. B. Factor endowment theory. C. Absolute advantage theory. D. Purchasing power parity. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, D. Purchasing power parity. Explanation. Option D is correct because purchasing power parity theory suggests that in the absence of trade barriers, the price for identical products sold in different countries must be the same. Option A is incorrect because strategic trade theory focuses on how government intervention in certain industries can enhance international competitiveness rather than explaining price-based exchange rate movements. Option B is incorrect because factor endowment theory explains comparative advantage based on locally abundant resources rather than the relationship between prices and exchange rates. Option C is incorrect because absolute advantage theory explains which countries can produce goods most efficiently rather than how exchange rates adjust to equalize international prices. An international finance manager notices that a basket of consumer goods costs more in one country than another when converted at current exchange rates. Purchasing power parity theory says this shouldn't persist indefinitely. Exchange rates should eventually adjust so identical goods cost the same everywhere. If a Big Mac costs $5 in the US and the equivalent of $7 in Switzerland, PPP suggests the Swiss franc is overvalued and should depreciate over time. Strategic trade theory deals with government intervention to boost certain industries. Factor endowment theory explains trade based on what resources countries have in abundance. Absolute advantage theory explains which countries can produce goods most efficiently. None of those address exchange rate adjustments based on price differences. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions discuss price differences between countries and how exchange rates should adjust to equalize prices, that's purchasing power parity. Quick recall hook. PPP equals price parity across places. Same goods should cost the same. 7. A European exporter sells products to American buyers but receives payment in dollars 3 months after shipment. To protect against unfavorable dollar depreciation during this period, which financial instrument would best lock in a guaranteed exchange rate today? A. Spot market transaction. B. Currency swap agreement. C. Forward exchange contract. D. Balance of payments adjustment. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Forward exchange contract. Explanation. Option C is correct because a forward transaction allows participants to buy and sell currencies now for future delivery, typically in 30, 90, or 180 days. Option A is incorrect because spot transactions involve immediate currency exchange and cannot protect against future rate fluctuations that occur between shipment and payment receipt. Option B is incorrect because currency swaps involve converting currency at one time with agreement to revert back at a specific future date, rather than locking rates for receivables. Option D is incorrect because balance of payments is a country's international transaction statement, rather than a financial instrument firms use to manage currency exposure. A European exporter receives payment in dollars 3 months after shipping goods to American buyers. If the dollar weakens during those 3 months, the exporter loses money when converting back to euros. The solution is a forward exchange contract, which locks in today's exchange rate for a transaction that will happen in the future, typically 30, 90, or 180 days out. Spot market transactions happen immediately, so they can't protect against future rate changes. Currency swaps involve exchanging currencies now with an agreement to swap back later, but that's a different animal than locking in a rate for receivables. Balance of payments is just a country's record of international transactions, not a tool companies use for currency protection. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions involve protecting against currency fluctuations for future payments or receipts, forward contracts are your answer. Quick recall hook. Forward equals future. Lock it in now, execute later. 8. A central bank occasionally intervenes in currency markets when the national currency moves outside acceptable boundaries, but otherwise allows market forces to determine the exchange rate. Which exchange rate policy classification best describes this governmental approach? A. Dirty or managed float. B. Clean or free float. C. Fixed rate policy. D. Currency board system. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Dirty or managed float. Explanation. Option A is correct, because a dirty or managed float is the common practice of determining exchange rates through selective government intervention, while still allowing market forces substantial influence. Option B is incorrect because a clean or free float represents a pure market solution with no government intervention, rather than the selective intervention described in this scenario. Option C is incorrect because a fixed rate policy involves maintaining a constant exchange rate relative to other currencies, rather than allowing market-influenced fluctuations with occasional intervention. Option D is incorrect because a currency board issues notes and coins convertible at a fixed rate to a key currency, rather than allowing floating rates with selective intervention. A central bank lets market forces mostly determine exchange rates, but steps in when the currency moves outside acceptable boundaries. This describes a dirty float, or managed float, the most common approach worldwide. The word dirty sounds negative, but it just means the government isn't completely hands-off. A clean float or free float means zero intervention, pure market determination. A fixed rate policy maintains a constant exchange rate, typically by pegging to another currency. A currency board is even more rigid, issuing domestic currency only when backed by foreign reserves at a fixed rate. The scenario specifically mentions occasional intervention combined with allowing market forces. That middle ground is managed float territory. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When you see government intervention combined with market-determined rates, that's a dirty or managed float. Quick recall hook. Dirty equals intervention. The government's hands aren't clean. 9. During a currency crisis, a financial analyst observes that investors simultaneously rush to sell the same currency, despite varying individual assessments of its fundamental value. Which behavioural phenomenon in foreign exchange markets best explains this coordinated mass-selling activity? A. Capital flight occurrence. B. Bandwagon effect among investors. C. Forward premium arbitrage. D. Purchasing power adjustment. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, B. Bandwagon effect among investors. Explanation. Option B is correct because the bandwagon effect describes the result of investors moving as a herd in the same direction at the same time, regardless of independent analysis. Option A is incorrect because capital flight describes individuals and companies exchanging domestic for foreign currency, but does not specifically explain the herd mentality driving coordinated movements. Option C is incorrect because forward premium arbitrage involves exploiting differences between forward and spot rates rather than explaining why investors follow crowd behavior during crises. Option D is incorrect because purchasing power adjustment refers to exchange rate movements based on price level differences rather than psychological factors driving investor herd behavior. During a currency crisis, investors rush to sell the same currency simultaneously, even though their individual analyses might differ. This herd behavior is called the bandwagon effect. People jump on because everyone else is jumping on, not because of independent reasoning. Fear spreads, everyone heads for the exits, and the sell-off accelerates. Capital flight is related. It's when money flees a country, but it doesn't explain the psychological mechanism driving coordinated behavior. Forward premium arbitrage is a technical trading strategy. Exploiting rate differences irrelevant here. Purchasing power adjustment relates to long-term exchange rate movements based on price levels, not panic selling. The key phrase is rush to sell despite varying individual assessments. That's the bandwagon in action. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe investors moving together regardless of their own analysis, especially during crises, that's the bandwagon effect. Quick recall hook. Bandwagon equals everyone jumping on, herd mentality. 10. A multinational manufacturer deliberately establishes production facilities across multiple countries in different currency zones so that currency losses from operations in one region may be offset by gains from another region. Which risk management approach does this geographic diversification strategy represent? A. Currency hedging through forwards. B. Spot transaction optimization. C. Fixed rate policy adoption. D. Strategic hedging across zones. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, D. Strategic hedging across zones. Explanation. Option D is correct because strategic hedging involves spreading activities across countries in different currency zones to offset currency losses in certain regions through gains in others. Option A is incorrect because currency hedging through forwards uses financial instruments to lock in exchange rates rather than diversifying geographic operations to balance currency exposures. Option B is incorrect because spot transaction optimization involves improving immediate currency exchanges rather than strategically locating operations across different currency zones for risk management. Option C is incorrect because fixed rate policy is a government approach to managing national currency values rather than a corporate strategy for managing multi-country currency exposures. A multinational manufacturer deliberately spreads production across multiple currency zones so that losses in one region might be offset by gains in another. This is strategic hedging, using your operational footprint as a risk management tool. If the euro tanks but the yen rises, your European losses might be balanced by Japanese gains. Currency hedging through forwards uses financial instruments to lock in rates, a different approach entirely. Spot transaction optimization just means getting better immediate exchange rates. Fixed rate policy is what governments do, not companies. The key here is production facilities across multiple countries in different currency zones. That's operational diversification for currency risk, which is strategic hedging. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe companies spreading operations across currency zones to balance gains and losses, that's strategic hedging. Quick recall hook. Strategic hedging equals spreading operations to spread risk. 11. A country that can produce both automobiles and textiles using fewer resources than any other nation still chooses to specialize in automobile production and import textiles from abroad. Which classical trade theory best explains why this specialization decision benefits this efficient nation? A. Theory of comparative advantage. B. Theory of mercantilism. C. Strategic trade theory. D. Product life cycle theory. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, A. Theory of comparative advantage. Explanation. Option A is correct because comparative advantage theory explains that nations benefit from specializing in goods where they have the greatest relative efficiency advantage, even if absolutely superior overall. Option B is incorrect because mercantilism viewed trade as zero-sum and advocated maximizing exports while minimizing imports rather than explaining mutual gains from specialization. Option C is incorrect because strategic trade theory focuses on government subsidies to enhance industry competitiveness rather than explaining why efficient nations still benefit from specialization. Option D is incorrect because product life cycle theory explains how production locations shift over time as products mature rather than explaining specialization decisions based on relative efficiency. Here's a classic trade theory question. A country can produce both automobiles and textiles using fewer resources than anyone else, yet it still chooses to specialize in automobiles and import textiles. Why would a nation that's better at everything not do everything? Comparative advantage explains this. Even if you're absolutely better at both products, you benefit by focusing on what you're relatively best at. Your opportunity cost advantage. If producing cars means giving up fewer textiles than other countries would specialize in cars, mercantilism saw trade as zero-sum. Export more, import less, hoard gold. Strategic trade theory focuses on government subsidies for key industries. Product life cycle theory tracks how production shifts geographically over time. None of those explain why an efficient nation still gains from specialization. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe countries that could produce everything better but still specialize, that's comparative advantage at work. Quick recall hook. Comparative equals relative efficiency. What do you give up least to produce? 12. A developing nation with abundant unskilled labor but limited capital equipment becomes a major exporter of hand-assembled consumer electronics while importing sophisticated machinery from capital-rich countries. Which trade theory best explains this observed pattern? A. Mercantilism trade beliefs. B. Absolute advantage theory. C. Factor endowment theory. D. Diamond theory framework. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, C. Factor endowment theory. Explanation. Option C is correct because factor endowment theory proposes that nations develop comparative advantage based on their locally abundant factors such as labour, land, capital, and technology. Option A is incorrect because mercantilism focused on accumulating gold and silver through trade surpluses rather than explaining how resource availability shapes export and import patterns. Option B is incorrect because absolute advantage theory explains efficiency differences but does not specifically address how local factor abundance determines which goods countries export and import. Option D is incorrect because diamond theory explains national competitive advantage through 4 specific conditions rather than directly linking factor abundance to trade pattern development. A developing country with lots of unskilled labour but little capital becomes a major exporter of hand-assembled electronics while importing sophisticated machinery. Factor endowment theory explains this perfectly. Countries develop comparative advantages based on what they have in abundance. Labour-abundant countries export labour-intensive goods. Capital-abundant countries export capital-intensive goods. It's about leveraging what you've got. Mercantilism was about hoarding gold through trade surpluses, not explaining trade patterns. Absolute advantage theory says trade based on who's most efficient, but doesn't specifically link factor abundance to trade. Diamond theory explains national competitiveness through 4 conditions: factor conditions, demand supporting industries, and rivalry. But it's broader than just factor abundance driving exports. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe trade patterns based on what resources a country has in abundance, labour, capital, land, that's factor endowment theory. Quick recall hook. Factor endowment equals trade what you've got plenty of. 13. Government officials argue that a new domestic semiconductor industry needs temporary protection from established foreign competitors until local firms can achieve sufficient scale and experience to compete independently. Which economic rationale for trade protection does this argument represent? A. National security justification. B. Infant industry argument. C. Consumer protection rationale. D. Environmental responsibility claim. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. B. Infant industry argument. Explanation. Option B is correct because the infant industry argument holds that young domestic firms need temporary government protection from mature foreign rivals to develop competitive capabilities. Option A is incorrect because national security justification focuses on protecting industries essential for defence rather than temporarily sheltering new industries until they mature competitively. Option C is incorrect because consumer protection rationale involves safeguarding buyers from unsafe or substandard products rather than protecting developing industries from foreign competition. Option D is incorrect because environmental responsibility claims focus on ecological concerns and sustainability rather than providing time for new industries to develop competitive strength. Government officials want to protect a new semiconductor industry from established foreign competitors until local firms gain enough scale and experience to compete on their own. This is the infant industry argument, one of the oldest justifications for trade protection. The logic: new industries need time to grow before they can fight against mature foreign giants. Give them temporary shelter, let them build capabilities, then remove the protection. National security justification protects industries essential for defence, like weapons manufacturing or critical technology. Consumer protection involves product safety standards, not shielding new industries. Environmental responsibility claims address ecological concerns. The key word is temporary protection until local firms can compete independently. That's infant industry language. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions mention young or new domestic industries needing temporary protection to develop competitive capabilities, that's the infant industry argument. Quick recall hook. Infant equals young industry, needs time to grow up. 14. A country implements complex customs procedures, extensive documentation requirements, and time-consuming inspections that effectively slow imported goods, while domestic products face no such obstacles. Which category of trade restriction do these bureaucratic measures represent? A. Import tariff barriers. B. Voluntary export restraints. C. Import quota limitations. D. Non-tariff barrier policies. Do you know the answer? Correct answer: D. Non-tariff barrier policies. Explanation. Option D is correct because non-tariff barriers include administrative policies and bureaucratic rules that make it harder to import foreign goods without imposing direct taxes on imports. Option A is incorrect because import tariffs are direct taxes imposed on imported goods rather than bureaucratic procedures and administrative obstacles that indirectly restrict trade flows. Option B is incorrect because voluntary export restraints are agreements where exporting countries limit their own exports rather than importing countries creating procedural obstacles for incoming goods. Option C is incorrect because import quotas set specific quantity limits on imports rather than using procedural complexity and documentation requirements to impede foreign goods entry. A country uses complex customs procedures, extensive documentation, and time-consuming inspections to slow down imports while domestic products sail through. These are non-tariff barriers, obstacles that restrict trade without directly taxing imports. Bureaucratic red tape, arbitrary standards, excessive paperwork, all designed to make importing painful without writing import tax on any document. Import tariffs are straightforward taxes on imports. You pay a percentage at the border. Voluntary export restraints happen when exporting countries agree to limit their own shipments. Import quotas set specific quantity limits. None of those match the description of procedural obstacles and bureaucratic hurdles. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe administrative obstacles, excessive procedures, or bureaucratic red tape that impedes imports, that's non-tariff barriers. Quick recall hook. Non-tariff equals obstacles without a tax label. 15. A national economic report reveals that the country purchased significantly more goods and services from foreign suppliers than it sold to buyers in other countries during the past fiscal year. Which balance of trade condition does this purchasing pattern indicate? A. Trade deficit condition exists. B. Trade surplus condition exists. C. Balanced trade situation exists. D. Mercantilism success exists. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. A. Trade deficit condition exists. Explanation. Option A is correct, because a trade deficit is an economic condition in which a nation imports more goods and services than it exports during a specified time period. Option B is incorrect because a trade surplus occurs when a nation exports more than it imports, which is the opposite of the purchasing pattern described in this scenario. Option C is incorrect because balanced trade would require approximately equal values of imports and exports, rather than the significantly higher import levels described in this situation. Option D is incorrect because mercantilism success would involve export surpluses and accumulation of wealth, rather than the import-heavy pattern that creates trade deficits. A country's economic report shows it purchased significantly more goods and services from foreign suppliers than it sold abroad. This is a trade deficit. Imports exceed exports. The money flowing out for foreign goods exceeds money flowing in from exports. A trade surplus is the opposite. Exports exceed imports. Balanced trade would mean roughly equal flows in both directions. Mercantilism success would show export surpluses and gold accumulation, the opposite of what's described. This question is testing basic trade balance terminology. More coming in than going out equals deficit. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe a country importing more than exporting, that's a trade deficit. Exporting more than importing is a trade surplus. Quick recall hook. Deficit means you're in the red, more going out than coming in. 16. A smartphone manufacturer enters an emerging market years after competitors established operations there and learns from their mistakes, avoids their failed distribution channels, and uses improved technology that competitors helped develop. Which market entry concept describes these benefits? A. First mover advantages gained. B. Liability of foreignness overcome. C. Late mover advantages realised. D. Agglomeration benefits captured. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. C. Late mover advantages realised. Explanation. Option C is correct because late mover advantages include free riding on first mover investments, resolution of technical and market uncertainty, and exploiting first mover difficulties and mistakes. Option A is incorrect because first mover advantages accrue to early entrants who establish market position before competitors rather than those who enter after learning from others. Option B is incorrect because liability of foreignness refers to disadvantages foreign firms face due to non-native status rather than timing-based benefits from entering markets after competitors. Option D is incorrect because agglomeration benefits arise from geographic clustering of economic activities rather than from entering markets after competitors have tested strategies. A smartphone manufacturer enters a market years after competitors, learns from their mistakes, avoids failed distribution channels, and uses improved technology. These are late mover advantages, benefits that come from letting others go first. First movers pay for market education, make expensive mistakes, and develop technology that later entrants can improve upon. Late movers observe, learn, and leapfrog you. First mover advantages go to early entrants. Brand recognition, customer loyalty, supply chain lockup. Liability of foreignness describes disadvantages from being a non-local company. Agglomeration benefits come from geographic clustering, not entry timing. The scenario specifically mentions learns from their mistakes and improved technology that competitors help develop. Classic late mover advantages. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe firms benefiting from entering after competitors by learning from others' mistakes or using improved technology, that's late mover advantage. Quick recall hook. Late movers learn from others' expensive lessons. 17. A European automobile manufacturer decides to expand into Asia by constructing entirely new production facilities and offices from the ground up, rather than acquiring existing local companies or partnering with established firms. Which foreign market entry mode describes this approach? A. Greenfield operation entry. B. Acquisition entry mode, RC, joint venture partnership. D. Licensing agreement entry. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, A. Greenfield operation entry. Explanation. Option A is correct because a greenfield operation creates a wholly owned subsidiary by building new factories and offices from scratch, rather than through acquisition or partnerships. Option B is incorrect because acquisition entry involves purchasing existing companies rather than constructing entirely new facilities and establishing operations independently from the ground up. Option C is incorrect because joint venture partnerships create new corporate entities jointly owned by two or more parent companies rather than wholly owned facilities built by a single firm. Option D is incorrect because licensing agreements transfer intellectual property rights for royalty fees rather than establishing manufacturing operations through new facility construction. A European automobile manufacturer expands to Asia by building entirely new production facilities from scratch, rather than buying existing companies or partnering with local firms. This is a greenfield operation. You're building on a greenfield, metaphorically speaking. No existing structures, no inherited problems, no cultural integration challenges from acquisitions. You design everything exactly how you want it. Acquisition entry means purchasing existing companies. Instant market presence but integration headaches. Joint ventures create shared entities with local partners. Less investment but less control. Licensing transfers intellectual property rights for royalty fees. No physical presence at all. The key phrase is constructing entirely new production facilities from the ground up. That's greenfield. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe building new facilities from scratch in foreign markets, that's greenfield operation. Quick recall hook. Greenfield equals starting fresh on an empty field. 18. A consumer electronics company chooses to establish research facilities in a region known for generating breakthrough innovations, world-class universities, and concentrations of highly skilled engineers and scientists. Which strategic goal primarily drives this location selection decision? A. Natural resource seeking motivation. B. Efficiency seeking motivation. C. Market seeking motivation. D. Innovation seeking motivation. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. D. Innovation-seeking motivation. Explanation. Option D is correct because innovation-seeking firms target countries and regions renowned for generating world-class innovations and concentrations of knowledge workers and research institutions. Option A is incorrect because natural resource seeking involves targeting locations with specific raw materials or commodities rather than knowledge resources and innovation generation capabilities. Option B is incorrect because efficiency seeking focuses on locations offering scale economies and low-cost factors rather than innovation capabilities and breakthrough research potential. Option C is incorrect because market seeking targets countries with strong demand for products and services rather than innovation generation capabilities and research talent concentrations. A consumer electronics company establishes research facilities in a region known for breakthrough innovations, world-class universities, and concentrations of skilled engineers and scientists. This is innovation seeking, targeting locations specifically because they generate new knowledge and technology. Companies hunting for the next breakthrough go where breakthroughs happen. Natural resource seeking targets raw materials, oil, minerals, agricultural land. Efficiency seeking focuses on low-cost locations for scale economies. Market seeking goes where customers are, big populations, growing demand. The scenario specifically mentions breakthrough innovations, world-class universities, and highly skilled engineers and scientists. All innovation markers. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe companies locating near research institutions, innovation hubs, or knowledge concentrations, that's innovation seeking. Quick recall hook. Innovation seeking goes where the breakthroughs happen. 19. A foreign retailer struggles to attract local customers who prefer established domestic competitors, faces difficulty understanding local consumer preferences, and encounters skepticism from local suppliers and employees. Which concept best describes these disadvantages the foreign firm experiences? A. First mover disadvantage effect. B. Liability of foreignness challenge. C. Institutional distance measurement. D. Cultural distance assessment. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. B. Liability of foreignness challenge. Explanation. Option B is correct because liability of foreignness is the inherent disadvantage that foreign firms experience in host countries because of their non-native status and unfamiliarity with local conditions. Option A is incorrect because first mover disadvantage relates to timing of market entry rather than the inherent challenges foreign firms face due to their non-native status in host countries. Option C is incorrect because institutional distance measures similarity between regulatory and normative institutions of countries rather than describing disadvantages foreign firms actually experience. Option D is incorrect because cultural distance measures differences between cultures rather than describing the operational and perceptual disadvantages that foreign firms encounter as outsiders. A foreign retailer struggles to attract local customers who prefer domestic competitors, can't understand local preferences, and faces skepticism from suppliers and employees. This is liability of foreignness, the inherent disadvantage of being an outsider. You don't know the local culture, lack established relationships, face consumer bias, and struggle to read market signals. Local competitors have none of these problems. First mover disadvantage relates to entry timing, not nationality. Institutional distance measures differences between country systems, a related concept but not the same as experiencing actual disadvantages. Cultural distance measures cultural differences, again a measurement, not the operational challenges themselves. The scenario describes a foreign firm actually experiencing these disadvantages. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe foreign companies struggling with local acceptance, consumer preferences, or relationship building because they're outsiders, that's liability of foreignness. Quick recall hook. Liability of foreignness equals outsider penalty. 20. A multinational corporation establishes a new corporate entity that will be jointly owned and governed by both itself and a local partner company, with each parent contributing resources and sharing control over the new venture. Which entry mode does this arrangement represent? A. Direct export arrangement. B. Wholly owned subsidiary. C. Joint venture formation. D. Licensing agreement. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, C. Joint venture formation. Explanation. Option C is correct because a joint venture is a new corporate entity jointly owned by two or more parent companies that share control and contribute resources. Option A is incorrect because direct export involves selling products abroad from home country production, rather than establishing a jointly owned corporate entity with local partners. Option B is incorrect because a wholly owned subsidiary is completely controlled by one parent firm, rather than shared ownership and governance with local partner companies. Option D is incorrect because licensing agreements transfer rights to intellectual property for fees rather than creating jointly owned corporate entities with shared control structures. A multinational corporation creates a new corporate entity jointly owned and governed by both itself and a local partner, with each contributing resources and sharing control. This is a joint venture, a legally separate company born from two parent firms. Both parents contribute capital, expertise, or other resources. Both have governance rights. Direct export involves shipping products from home without establishing any local presence. Wholly owned subsidiaries are completely controlled by one parent. No sharing. Licensing agreements transfer intellectual property rights for fees, but don't create new jointly owned entities. The key phrases are jointly owned, each parent contributing resources, and sharing control. All joint venture hallmarks. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe two or more companies creating a new entity with shared ownership and control, that's a joint venture. Quick recall hook. Joint venture equals joint ownership. Two parents, one baby company. 21. Industry analysts observe that a market with only 4 major players selling nearly identical products has maintained remarkably stable prices despite changing costs, and all competitors seem to follow pricing moves set by the largest firm. Which industry characteristic combination most likely explains this coordinated behaviour? A. High competition intensity factors. B. Strong first mover advantages present. C. Significant entry barrier absence. D. Conditions conducive to collusion. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, D. Conditions conducive to collusion. Explanation. Option D is correct because industries primed for collusion tend to have fewer rivals, a price leader, homogeneous products, and high entry barriers that facilitate coordinated competitive behaviour. Option A is incorrect because high competition intensity would produce price wars and fluctuations rather than the stable prices and coordinated behaviour described in this industry scenario. Option B is incorrect because first mover advantages relate to entry timing benefits rather than explaining why established competitors maintain coordinated pricing behaviour in mature markets. Option C is incorrect because significant entry barrier absence would invite new competitors and disrupt coordination rather than enabling the stable coordinated behaviour among existing few players. Let's examine why some industries seem allergic to price competition. 4 major players selling identical products, stable prices despite cost changes, and everyone following the largest firm's pricing moves. These are textbook conditions conducive to collusion. Collusion doesn't require secret meetings. It can emerge naturally when industries have few competitors, homogeneous products, a clear price leader, and high barriers keeping new entrants out. Everyone tacitly agrees that price wars hurt everyone, so they coordinate without explicit coordination. High competition intensity would produce the opposite, price wars and constant fluctuation. First mover advantages relate to entry timing, not pricing behaviour among established players. Absence of entry barriers would invite disruptors who'd undercut the cosy arrangement. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe few competitors, identical products, stable prices and price leadership, think collusion conditions. Quick recall. Hook. Collusion conditions equals few players plus same products plus price leader. 22. When a powerful multinational enterprise enters their home market, local competitors respond by focusing intensely on market segments where local knowledge and relationships provide advantages that the foreign giant cannot easily replicate. Which competitive strategy do these local firms employ? A. Defender strategy, leveraging assets. B. Contender strategy, expanding abroad. C. Dodger strategy through cooperation. D. Extender strategy, going overseas. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. A. Defender strategy, leveraging assets. Explanation. Option A is correct because the defender strategy involves leveraging local assets and focusing on areas where multinational enterprises are weak due to limited local knowledge and relationships. Option B is incorrect because the contender strategy centers on rapid learning and expanding overseas to compete globally rather than defending home market segments against foreign entrants. Option C is incorrect because the Dodger strategy involves cooperating through joint ventures or selling off to multinationals rather than competing by leveraging local advantages against them. Option D is incorrect because the extender strategy focuses on leveraging homegrown competencies abroad rather than defending home market positions against entering multinational competitors. A powerful multinational invades your home market. How do local firms respond? The defender strategy says, focus on what the giant can't replicate: your local knowledge, your relationships, your understanding of niche customer needs. You're not trying to beat Goliath everywhere. You're protecting the segments where being local matters most. The contender strategy takes a different approach: rapid learning and expanding overseas to compete globally. Dodgers cooperate with the invader through joint ventures or sell out entirely. Extenders take their homegrown capabilities abroad. The key phrase here is focusing on segments where local knowledge provides advantages. That's pure defender thinking. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When local firms respond to M&E entry by leveraging local knowledge and relationships in specific segments, that's the defender strategy. Quick recall hook. Defender defends home turf with local advantages. 23. A pharmaceutical company chooses to establish its own foreign subsidiaries rather than licensing its patented formulas to overseas manufacturers because it fears that licensees might eventually become competitors or share proprietary knowledge inappropriately. Which FDI advantage concept best explains this decision? A. Location advantages in markets. B. Ownership advantages from assets. C. Internalization advantages gained. D. Agglomeration advantages achieved. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. C. Internalization advantages gained. Explanation. Option C is correct because internalization replaces cross-border market relationships with internal firm operations to combat dissemination risks and protect proprietary knowledge from inappropriate diffusion. Option A is incorrect because location advantages relate to benefits from operating in favourable geographic areas rather than protecting proprietary knowledge from potential licensing partner misappropriation. Option B is incorrect because ownership advantages involve possessing valuable assets, but do not explain why firms choose internal operations over licensing to protect these assets. Option D is incorrect because agglomeration advantages arise from clustering of economic activities in certain locations rather than from protecting proprietary knowledge through internal operations. A pharmaceutical company could license its patented formulas to overseas manufacturers, but chooses instead to establish its own foreign subsidiaries. Why? Internalization advantages. The fear is real. Licensees might become competitors or leak proprietary knowledge. By keeping operations internal, within the firm's own boundaries, the company maintains control over its secrets. Location advantages explain why you'd want to be in a particular geography: access to markets, resources, talent. Ownership advantages are about having valuable assets in the first place: your patents, your brand. Agglomeration advantages come from clustering near other firms in your industry. None of those explain the decision to own rather than license. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe firms choosing subsidiaries over licensing to protect proprietary knowledge from dissemination, that's internalization advantage. Quick recall hook. Internalization keeps secrets internal, no leaky partners. 24. Government investigators discover that major competitors in an industry have been secretly meeting to agree on prices and divide market territories among themselves rather than competing independently. Which legal framework specifically addresses and prohibits such coordinated competitor behaviour? A. Intellectual property laws. B. Antitrust and competition laws. C. International trade regulations. D. Foreign investment restrictions. Do you know the answer? Correct answer: B. Antitrust and competition laws. Explanation. Option B is correct because antitrust laws specifically attempt to curtail anti-competitive business practices, including collusion, price fixing, and market division agreements among competitors. Option A is incorrect because intellectual property laws protect patents, copyrights, and trademarks rather than prohibiting coordinated pricing and market division agreements among industry competitors. Option C is incorrect because international trade regulations govern cross-border commerce and tariffs rather than addressing domestic collusion and anti-competitive coordination among competitors. Option D is incorrect because foreign investment restrictions regulate overseas capital flows and ownership rather than prohibiting coordinated anti-competitive behaviour among domestic industry competitors. Government investigators uncover competitors secretly meeting to fix prices and divide markets. This is illegal almost everywhere, and the laws that prohibit it are called antitrust laws or competition laws. These laws exist to prevent anti-competitive behaviour, collusion, price fixing, market division, monopolistic practices. The goal is preserving competition itself. Intellectual property laws protect inventions, creative works, and brands, different purpose entirely. International trade regulations govern tariffs and cross-border commerce. Foreign investment restrictions regulate who can own what in a country. Only antitrust law specifically targets the behaviour described: competitors coordinating to avoid competing. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe competitors secretly agreeing on prices or dividing markets, the relevant legal framework is antitrust or competition law. Quick recall hook. Antitrust busts trusts, stops competitors from colluding. 25. A government carefully evaluates each proposed foreign investment project individually, approving only those where anticipated benefits to the national economy outweigh potential costs and rejecting proposals that appear exploitative or harmful. Which political perspective toward foreign direct investment does this approach represent? A. Radical view opposing investment. B. Free market view minimizing control. C. Mercantilist view maximizing exports. D. Pragmatic nationalism balancing interests. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer: D. Pragmatic nationalism balancing interests. Explanation. Option D is correct because pragmatic nationalism views foreign direct investment as having both advantages and disadvantages, and only approves investment when benefits clearly outweigh associated costs. Option A is incorrect because the radical view treats all foreign investment as exploitative imperialism, rather than evaluating individual projects for net benefits to the national economy. Option B is incorrect because the free market view advocates minimal government intervention in investment decisions rather than careful evaluation and selective approval of individual projects. Option C is incorrect because mercantilism focuses on maximising exports and trade surpluses rather than evaluating foreign investment projects based on balanced cost-benefit assessments. A government evaluates each foreign investment proposal individually, approving only those where benefits outweigh costs. This middle ground approach is called pragmatic nationalism. It's neither hostile to all foreign investment nor blindly welcoming. Each project gets scrutinised. Will it create jobs, transfer technology, or will it exploit resources and repatriate all profits? The radical view treats all foreign investment as exploitative imperialism. Reject everything. The free market view says let capital flow freely with minimal government interference. Mercantilism focuses on trade surpluses and gold accumulation, not investment evaluation. The key is evaluates individually, and benefits outweigh costs. That's the pragmatic nationalist balancing act. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When governments approve foreign investment selectively based on cost-benefit analysis, that's pragmatic nationalism. Quick recall hook. Pragmatic nationalism equals practical evaluation, case by case. 26. A business consultant advises clients considering expansion into a country where a single political party controls all government functions, suppresses opposition voices, and maintains absolute authority over economic decisions without citizen elections. Which political system classification describes this governmental structure? A. Democratic political system. B. Mixed political economy. C. Theocratic totalitarianism type. D. Totalitarianism or dictatorship. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, D. Totalitarianism or dictatorship. Explanation. Option D is correct because totalitarianism is defined as a political system in which one person or party exercises absolute political control over the population without democratic participation. Option A is incorrect because democracy involves citizens electing representatives to govern on their behalf rather than single-party absolute control without elections or opposition. Option B is incorrect because mixed political economy describes economic systems combining market and command elements rather than political systems with absolute single-party governmental control. Option C is incorrect because theocratic totalitarianism specifically involves religious party control rather than general single-party dominance without reference to religious authority. One party controls everything. No elections, no opposition, absolute authority over economic decisions. This is totalitarianism or dictatorship, a political system where power concentrates in one person or party without democratic participation. Democracy involves citizens electing representatives, the opposite of what's described. Mixed political economy refers to economic systems blending market and command elements, not political control structures. Theocratic totalitarianism specifically involves religious authority running the state. The scenario mentions single political party with absolute authority and without citizen elections. That's textbook totalitarianism. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe single-party absolute control without elections or opposition, that's totalitarianism. Quick recall hook. Totalitarianism equals total control by one party. 27. When resolving a complex commercial dispute, judges in this country primarily rely on comprehensive written statutes and formal legal codes rather than looking to previous court decisions for guidance. Which legal system tradition does this code-based judicial approach represent? A. Civil law tradition. B. Common law tradition. C. Theocratic law tradition. D. Administrative law tradition. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, A. Civil law tradition. Explanation. Option A is correct, because civil law uses comprehensive statutes and codes as the primary means to form legal judgments, rather than relying on precedents from previous judicial decisions. Option B is incorrect because common law is shaped by precedents and traditions from previous judicial decisions, rather than primarily consulting comprehensive written statutory codes. Option C is incorrect because theocratic law bases legal judgments on religious teachings, rather than on comprehensive secular statutes and formal legal codes. Option D is incorrect because administrative law refers to regulations governing government agencies rather than describing a comprehensive statutory judicial tradition. Judges resolving disputes look to comprehensive written statutes and formal legal codes rather than previous court decisions. This is the civil law tradition, the dominant legal system in continental Europe, Latin America, and much of Asia. Everything is codified. Judges apply the code, not precedent. Common law works differently. Judges look to previous decisions for guidance, building law through accumulated precedents. Theocratic law derives from religious teachings. Administrative law governs government agencies specifically, not the broader judicial tradition. The key phrase is comprehensive written statutes, rather than previous court decisions. That's civil law. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe judges relying on written codes rather than precedent, that's civil law tradition. Quick recall, hook. Civil law uses codes. Common law uses cases. 28. A technology firm hesitates to invest in a country where the government has historically seized private business assets without fair compensation, and where courts rarely enforce contracts against government entities. Which fundamental institutional concern most directly threatens this firm's potential investment? A. High tariff barrier levels. B. Strong antitrust enforcement. C. Weak property rights protection. D. Excessive market competition. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, C. Weak property rights protection. Explanation. Option C is correct because property rights are the legal rights to use economic property and derive income from it, and weak protection through expropriation risk discourages investment. Option A is incorrect because tariff barriers affect trade in goods crossing borders rather than the security of invested assets and enforceability of contracts within the country. Option B is incorrect because strong antitrust enforcement promotes competition rather than threatening invested assets through government seizure or contract non-enforcement issues. Option D is incorrect because excessive market competition affects business profitability through rivalry rather than threatening fundamental ownership and contractual rights of invested assets. A tech firm hesitates to invest where governments seize private assets without compensation, and courts don't enforce contracts against the state. This is a property rights problem. Property rights mean you can use your assets, derive income from them, and trust that ownership will be protected. When governments expropriate without compensation, those rights become worthless. Tariff barriers affect trade, not asset security. Strong antitrust enforcement is actually good for business. It ensures fair competition. Excessive competition affects profitability, not fundamental ownership rights. The scenario describes expropriation risk and contract non-enforcement, both property rights failures. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe government seizure of assets or failure to enforce contracts, that's weak property rights protection. Quick recall hook. Property rights equals ownership security. Can you keep what's yours? 29. In this type of economy, the government owns and controls all major industries, determines production quantities through central planning agencies, and sets prices administratively rather than through market mechanisms. Which economic system classification matches this description? A. Market economy system. B. Laissez-faire system. C. Mixed economy system. D. Command economy system. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. D. Command economy system. Explanation: option D is correct because under a command economy, all factors of production are government-owned and controlled, with supply, demand and pricing determined through central planning. Option A is incorrect because market economies rely on the invisible hand of market forces with minimal government intervention rather than central planning and state ownership. Option B is incorrect because laissez-faire describes a hands-off governmental approach characteristic of market economies rather than centralised planning and state control systems. Option C is incorrect because mixed economies combine elements of both market and command systems rather than featuring complete government ownership and centralised price determination. The government owns all major industries, central planners determine production quantities, and prices are set administratively. This is a command economy. The state controls everything: supply, demand, pricing, all determined by planning agencies, not market forces. Market economies rely on the invisible hand: supply and demand, price signals, minimal government interference. Laissez-faire is essentially extreme market economy philosophy. Mixed economies blend elements of both: some state control, some market freedom. The key indicators are government owns, central planning, and administratively set prices. Pure command economy. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe government ownership of production and centrally planned pricing, that's a command economy. Quick recall hook. Command economy means the government commands everything. 30. A pharmaceutical company invests heavily in developing new medications and relies on government-granted exclusive rights to manufacture and sell these innovations for a specified period to recover research costs. Which form of intellectual property protection provides these exclusive commercial rights? A. Patent rights protection. B. Trademark registration protection. C. Copyright ownership protection. D. Trade secret protection. Do you know the answer? Correct answer: A. Patent rights protection. Explanation: option A is correct because patents are legal rights awarded by government authorities to inventors of new products or processes, granting exclusive rights to derive income from inventions. Option B is incorrect because trademarks protect exclusive rights to use specific names, brands and designs rather than granting exclusive manufacturing rights for new inventions. Option C is incorrect because copyrights protect the exclusive rights of authors and publishers to publish and disseminate creative works rather than manufacturing rights for inventions. Option D is incorrect because trade secrets rely on maintaining confidentiality rather than government-granted exclusive rights with defined protection periods for commercial exploitation. A pharmaceutical company invests heavily in developing new medications and needs government-granted exclusive rights to manufacture and sell these innovations for a specified period. That's a patent. Patents give inventors exclusive commercial rights for a defined time, typically 20 years, allowing them to recoup research investment before competitors can copy. Trademarks protect brand names, logos, and designs, not inventions. Copyrights protect creative works like books, music, and software code. Trade secrets rely on keeping information confidential rather than government-granted exclusivity. The key is government-granted exclusive rights to manufacture and sell innovations. That's patent territory. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe exclusive rights to manufacture new inventions for a limited period, that's patent protection. Quick recall hook. Patents protect products. New inventions get exclusive rights. 31. A senior executive argues that understanding business competition requires studying not only cross-border activities, but also domestic operations, emerging economy dynamics, and the 4 billion people living at the economic pyramid's base. Which conceptual approach to studying business does this comprehensive perspective represent? A. Traditional international business. B. Domestic business focus. C. Global business perspective. D. Export-oriented approach. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Global business perspective. Explanation. Option C is correct because global business encompasses both international cross-border activities and domestic business activities, including competition in emerging economies and at the pyramid base. Option A is incorrect because traditional international business typically focuses more narrowly on cross-border activities rather than the comprehensive domestic and emerging market perspective described. Option B is incorrect because a domestic business focus would exclude the international and cross-border dimensions that are explicitly included in this comprehensive business perspective. Option D is incorrect because an export-oriented approach emphasizes selling goods abroad rather than the comprehensive perspective, including domestic operations and emerging market dynamics. An executive argues that understanding business requires studying not just cross-border activities, but domestic operations, emerging economies, and the 4 billion people at the economic pyramid's base. This comprehensive view is the global business perspective. It's broader than traditional international business, which focused mainly on cross-border transactions. Global business encompasses everything: domestic competition, international expansion, emerging markets, and the bottom of the pyramid. A domestic-only focus excludes international dimensions. An export-oriented approach emphasizes selling abroad, not the full picture. The key is the comprehensive scope, both international and domestic, including emerging markets and base of pyramid populations. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe a comprehensive perspective, including domestic, international, and emerging market activities, that's global business perspective. Quick recall hook. Global business equals the whole picture. Domestic plus international plus emerging. 32. Investment analysts frequently group Brazil, Russia, India, and China together when discussing rapidly growing economies that are becoming increasingly important players in global commerce and investment flows. Which commonly used acronym identifies this specific group of emerging economies? A. G20 member nations. B. Triad economic regions. C. Base of pyramid markets. D. BRIC emerging economies. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, D. BRIC emerging economies. Explanation. Option D is correct because BRIC is the acronym specifically standing for Brazil, Russia, India, and China, representing major emerging economies with growing global economic influence. Option A is incorrect because G20 refers to the group of 19 major countries plus the European Union, rather than specifically the 4 emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Option B is incorrect because the triad refers to developed economies in North America, Western Europe, and Japan rather than the emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Option C is incorrect because base of pyramid refers to the 4 billion people earning less than $2,000 annually rather than the specific 4 emerging economy nations. Investment analysts group Brazil, Russia, India, and China together when discussing rapidly growing emerging economies. The acronym is BRIC, sometimes BRICS with South Africa added. These 4 nations represent massive populations, rapid economic growth, and increasing global influence. G20 is broader, 19 major economies plus the European Union. The triad refers to the 3 developed regions, North America, Western Europe, and Japan. Base of pyramid refers to the 4 billion people earning under $2,000 annually, a market segment, not a country grouping. The question specifically names Brazil, Russia, India, and China. That spells BRIC. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions reference Brazil, Russia, India, and China as an emerging economy group, the answer is BRIC quick recall hook. BRIC equals Brazil, Russia, India, China, the big emerging four. 33. A professor explains that globalization is neither a completely new phenomenon nor an unstoppable linear progression, but rather moves back and forth between periods of greater integration and periods of increased barriers throughout history. Which metaphor best captures this conceptualization of globalization? A. Pendulum swinging between extremes. B. Rising tide lifting boats. C. One-way evolutionary street. D. Flat world without borders. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. A. Pendulum swinging between extremes. Explanation. Option A is correct because viewing globalization as a pendulum suggests it swings from one extreme to another over time rather than progressing in only one direction continuously. Option B is incorrect because the rising tide metaphor suggests universal benefits from globalization rather than capturing the back and forth historical movement between integration and barriers. Option C is incorrect because the one-way evolutionary street view treats globalization as continuous historical progress rather than acknowledging reversals and pendulum-like movements over time. Option D is incorrect because the flat world concept emphasizes barrier elimination rather than capturing the historical pattern of oscillation between integration and increased restrictions. Globalization isn't new and it doesn't move in one direction. It swings back and forth, periods of greater integration followed by periods of increased barriers. Think of a pendulum. Before World War I, global integration was remarkably high. Then came wars, depression, and protectionism. After World War II, integration increased again. The 2008 crisis triggered new barriers. The pendulum keeps swinging. Rising tide suggests everyone benefits uniformly. One-way street implies continuous progress. Flat world emphasizes barrier elimination. None capture the back and forth historical pattern. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe globalization moving between integration and barriers over time, the pendulum metaphor fits. Quick recall hook. Globalization pendulum swings. Integration then barriers. Back and forth. 34. When analysing why some firms succeed internationally while others fail, researchers examine both the external rules governing competition in different countries and the internal capabilities that firms possess and leverage. Which two core perspectives does this analytical approach combine? A. Diamond theory and mercantilism. B. Institution-based and resource-based views. C. Product cycle and strategic trade. D. Absolute and comparative advantage. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. B. Institution-based and resource-based views. Explanation. Option B is correct because the institution-based view examines external rules of the game, while the resource-based view focuses on internal firm capabilities, together forming the unified framework. Option A is incorrect because diamond theory and mercantilism are specific trade theories rather than the comprehensive analytical perspectives examining external rules and internal firm capabilities. Option C is incorrect because product cycle and strategic trade are specific trade theories explaining trade patterns rather than the broad perspectives combining institutional analysis with capability assessment. Option D is incorrect because absolute and comparative advantage are classical trade theories explaining national specialization rather than perspectives examining institutional rules and firm resources together. Researchers examine both external rules governing competition across countries and internal capabilities firms possess. This combines the institution-based view and the resource-based view, the two fundamental perspectives in international business strategy. The institution-based view looks outward. What are the rules of the game in different countries? The resource-based view looks inward. What unique capabilities does the firm have? Together they form a unified analytical framework. Diamond theory and mercantilism are specific trade concepts. Product cycle and strategic trade are trade pattern theories. Absolute and comparative advantage explain national specialization. None combine external rules with internal capabilities like the two core views do. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions reference both external institutional rules and internal firm resources, that's the institution-based and resource-based view combination. Quick recall, hook. Institution-based looks out, resource-based looks in. Together they explain success. 35. A corporation headquartered in Germany operates manufacturing plants in 12 countries, directly manages these facilities, and makes strategic decisions about resource allocation across all locations from its central offices. Which term best describes this type of international business organization? A. Domestic enterprise only. B. Export trading company. C. Portfolio investment fund. D. Multinational enterprise. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, D. Multinational enterprise. Explanation. Option D is correct because a multinational enterprise is defined as a firm that engages in foreign direct investment by directly investing in, controlling and managing value-added activities in other countries. Option A is incorrect because a domestic enterprise operates within a single country rather than directly managing manufacturing operations across multiple countries, as described in this scenario. Option B is incorrect because export trading companies facilitate international sales without directly investing in and managing foreign manufacturing operations across multiple countries. Option C is incorrect because portfolio investment funds hold foreign securities without direct management control, rather than operating and managing manufacturing facilities across multiple nations. A German corporation operates manufacturing plants in 12 countries, directly manages these facilities, and makes strategic decisions from central headquarters. This is a multinational enterprise, an MNE. The defining characteristics: foreign direct investment, direct management control, and value-added activities across multiple countries. Domestic enterprises operate in one country only. Export trading companies facilitate sales without direct foreign investment. Portfolio investment funds hold securities without management control. The key is directly manages and manufacturing in multiple countries. That's M&E territory. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe firms directly investing in and managing operations across multiple countries, that's a multinational enterprise. Quick recall hook. M&E equals multiple nations directly managed. 36. An automobile manufacturer based in Japan establishes car assembly plants in the United States that perform essentially the same production activities as its Japanese factories, producing similar vehicles for the American market. Which type of foreign direct investment does this parallel operation represent? A. Horizontal FDI expansion. B. Upstream vertical FDI. C. Downstream vertical FDI. D. Portfolio investment strategy. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Horizontal FDI expansion. Explanation. Option A is correct because horizontal FDI occurs when a firm duplicates its home country-based activities at the same value chain stage in a host country through direct investment. Option B is incorrect because upstream vertical FDI involves expanding backward through production stages toward raw materials rather than duplicating the same manufacturing activities abroad. Option C is incorrect because downstream vertical FDI involves expanding forward through distribution stages rather than replicating the same production activities in a different country. Option D is incorrect because portfolio investment involves holding foreign securities without management control, rather than establishing and operating manufacturing facilities in foreign countries. A Japanese automaker builds assembly plants in the US that perform essentially the same production activities as its Japanese factories. This is horizontal FDI, duplicating home country activities at the same value chain stage abroad. You're not going backward to raw materials or forward to retail. You're doing the same thing in a different place. Upstream vertical FDI moves backward towards suppliers and raw materials. Downstream vertical FDI moves forward toward distribution and customers. Portfolio investment means holding securities without operational control. The scenario describes same production activities in a different country. Horizontal expansion. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe firms replicating the same activities abroad that they perform at home, that's horizontal FDI. Quick recall hook. Horizontal FDI equals same activity, different location. 37. A consulting firm helps clients analyze foreign investment decisions by examining what unique assets the firm possesses, what geographic benefits different countries offer, and why establishing own subsidiaries beats licensing or exporting. Which analytical framework organizes these three investment considerations? A. Vireo resource analysis. B. Diamond theory assessment. C. OA advantages framework. D. Five forces industry analysis. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. OA advantages framework. Explanation. Option C is correct because OLI represents ownership advantages from unique assets, location advantages from geographic benefits, and internalization advantages from choosing subsidiaries over alternatives. Option A is incorrect because VREO analyzes whether resources are valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized rather than examining the three distinct foreign direct investment advantage categories of ownership, location, and internalization. Option B is incorrect because diamond theory examines national competitive advantage through four industry conditions rather than the three foreign direct investment considerations of ownership, location, and internalization. Option D is incorrect because five forces analysis examines industry competitive pressures rather than the ownership, location, and internalization advantages relevant to foreign direct investment decisions. A consulting firm analyzes FDI decisions by examining unique firm assets, geographic location benefits, and why owned subsidiaries beat licensing. These three considerations form the OLI framework: ownership, location, internalization. Ownership advantages. What unique assets does the firm have? Location advantages. Why invest in this particular place? Internalization advantages. Why own operations instead of licensing or partnering? VREO analyzes whether resources are valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized. Diamond theory examines national competitiveness. Five forces analyzes industry competitive pressure. Only OLI directly addresses all three FDI decision factors. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe analyzing unique assets, location benefits, and make versus buy decisions for FDI, that's the OLI framework. Quick recall hook. OLI equals own it, locate it, internalize it. 38. Government officials welcome foreign manufacturers because their presence introduces advanced production techniques that local competitors observe and eventually adopt, improving the overall technological capabilities of domestic industry. Which positive spillover effect from foreign investment does this technology diffusion represent? A. Capital flight prevention. B. Trade deficit reduction. C. Currency stabilization effect. D. Technology spillover benefit. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. D. Technology spillover benefit. Explanation. Option D is correct because technology spillover occurs when foreign technology diffused domestically benefits domestic firms and industries through observation, imitation, and adoption of advanced techniques. Option A is incorrect because capital flight refers to domestic currency being exchanged for foreign currency, rather than the positive diffusion of technology from foreign to domestic firms. Option B is incorrect because trade deficit reduction relates to balancing imports and exports rather than the technological learning that occurs when domestic firms observe foreign investor operations. Option C is incorrect because currency stabilization involves exchange rate management rather than the knowledge transfer that occurs when domestic industries learn from foreign investor technologies. Government officials welcome foreign manufacturers because local competitors observe their advanced techniques and eventually adopt them. This is technology spillover, knowledge diffusing from foreign investors to domestic firms. It happens through observation, employee movement, supplier relationships, and imitation. Local firms get smarter without paying for R&D. Capital flight is money leaving a country unrelated. Trade deficit reduction involves balancing imports and exports. Currency stabilization is exchange rate management. Only technology spillover captures the knowledge transfer described. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe domestic firms learning from foreign investor techniques, that's technology spillover. Quick recall hook. Technology spillover equals knowledge leaking from foreign to local firms. 39. After a mining company invests billions in infrastructure and equipment that cannot be relocated, the host government demands renegotiation of tax terms and profit-sharing arrangements, knowing the company cannot easily abandon its substantial fixed investments. Which concept describes this shift in negotiating leverage after initial investment? A. First mover advantage gain. B. Obsolescing bargain phenomenon. C. Market imperfection, exploitation. D. Dissemination risk materialization. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, B. Obsolescing bargain phenomenon. Explanation. Option B is correct because the obsolescing bargain describes how deals between multinational enterprises and host governments change after initial entry, when governments recognize that substantial sunk costs limit firm mobility. Option A is incorrect because first mover advantage relates to benefits from early market entry rather than the shifting bargaining power that occurs after firms commit substantial immobile investments. Option C is incorrect because market imperfection exploitation relates to why firms internalize operations rather than explaining how government leverage increases after firms make substantial fixed investments. Option D is incorrect because dissemination risk involves unauthorized knowledge diffusion rather than the renegotiation pressure governments apply after firms commit substantial immobile capital investments. A mining company invests billions in immovable infrastructure. Then the host government demands better terms, knowing the company can't just pack up and leave. This is the obsolescing bargain, the deal that goes stale after investment. Before entry, the company has leverage. We might invest elsewhere. After entry, with billions sunk into equipment that can't move, the government holds the cards. First mover advantage relates to early market entry benefits. Market imperfection exploitation explains why firms internalize operations. Dissemination risk involves knowledge leakage. Only obsolescing bargain describes the power shift after investment locks firms in. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe governments demanding renegotiation after firms make substantial immobile investments, that's the obsolescing bargain. Quick recall hook. Obsolescing bargain equals deal goes bad after you're stuck. 40. Economic analysts distinguish between the total accumulated value of all foreign investments made in a country over many years and the amount of new foreign investment entering during a single recent year. Which term describes this total accumulated investment value? A. FDI stock measurement. B. FDI flow measurement. C. FDI outflow measurement. D. FDI inflow measurement. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. FDI stock measurement. Explanation: option A is correct, because FDI stock is the total accumulation of inbound foreign direct investment in a country or outbound investment from a country over time. Option B is incorrect because FDI flow measures the amount of investment moving in a given period, such as a year, rather than the total accumulated value over many years. Option C is incorrect because FDI outflow specifically refers to investment leaving a country rather than the total accumulated value of investment received over time. Option D is incorrect because FDI inflow refers to investment entering during a specific period rather than the cumulative total of all investment accumulated in a country. Analysts distinguish between total accumulated foreign investment over many years and new investment during a single year. The total accumulation is FDI stock, the running total of all investment built up over time. Think of it like a bathtub. Stock is the water level. Flow is the water coming in each year. FDI flow measures what enters or leaves during a specific period. Outflow specifically means investment leaving. Inflow specifically means investment entering. The scenario asks about total accumulated value over many years. That's stock. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions distinguish between accumulated investment totals and annual investment amounts, stock is the total and flow is the annual amount. Quick recall hook. Stock equals stored total, flow equals annual amount. 41. Researchers studying why certain nations dominate specific industries examine 4 interconnected factors: local demand sophistication, related supplier industries, factor conditions, and competitive rivalry among domestic firms. Which theoretical framework organizes these 4 national competitiveness determinants? A. Factor endowment theory. B. Comparative advantage theory. C. Product life cycle theory. D. Diamond theory of competitiveness. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, D. Diamond theory of competitiveness. Explanation: option D is correct because the theory of national competitive advantage, also called diamond theory, explains industry competitiveness through 4 aspects that form a diamond shape. Option A is incorrect because factor endowment theory focuses specifically on locally abundant resources like labour and capital rather than the 4 interconnected diamond conditions, including demand and rivalry. Option B is incorrect because comparative advantage theory explains specialisation based on relative efficiency rather than examining the 4 national conditions that create industry-specific competitive advantages. Option C is incorrect because product life cycle theory explains how production locations shift as products mature rather than examining the national conditions that create sustained industry competitiveness. Why does Switzerland dominate watchmaking? Why does Silicon Valley lead in tech? Diamond theory explains this through 4 interconnected factors forming a diamond shape. Factor conditions: what resources and infrastructure exist locally? Demand conditions: how sophisticated and demanding are local customers? Related and supporting industries: are there strong suppliers and related businesses nearby? Firm strategy, structure, and rivalry: does intense domestic competition sharpen firms for global battle? These 4 reinforce each other. Factor endowment theory focuses narrowly on resource abundance, labour, land, capital. Comparative advantage explains specialisation through relative efficiency. Product life cycle theory tracks how production locations shift over time. None capture the four-factor interconnected system that diamond theory provides. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions mention four factors, including demand sophistication, supplier industries, factor conditions, and domestic rivalry, that's diamond theory. Quick recall hook. Diamond has 4 points. Four factors create national competitive advantage. 42. Government officials provide substantial financial support to domestic aerospace manufacturers, arguing that these subsidies help national champions achieve the scale and technological capabilities needed to compete against established foreign rivals in global markets. Which trade policy approach do these government payments represent? A. Strategic trade policy approach. B. Free trade policy stance. C. Mercantilist wealth accumulation. D. Infant industry protectionism. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Strategic trade policy approach. Explanation. Option A is correct because strategic trade policy involves government subsidies that provide companies a strategic advantage, particularly in industries where scale and technology matter for international success. Option B is incorrect because free trade policy advocates minimal government intervention rather than substantial financial support to help domestic firms compete against foreign rivals. Option C is incorrect because mercantilism focused on accumulating gold and silver through trade surpluses rather than using targeted subsidies to build competitive capabilities in specific industries. Option D is incorrect because infant industry protectionism typically involves tariff barriers for new industries rather than direct subsidies to help established firms achieve global competitive scale. The government provides substantial subsidies to aerospace manufacturers, arguing these national champions need help achieving scale and technology to compete globally. This is strategic trade policy, government intervention targeting specific industries where scale and technology determine winners. Think Airbus versus Boeing. Governments pick industries where first-mover advantages and learning curves create lasting competitive positions, then subsidize domestic players to capture those positions. Free trade policy says, stay out of it, let markets decide. Mercantilism was about hoarding gold through trade surpluses, not targeted industry subsidies. Infant industry protection uses tariff barriers for new industries, not direct payments to established firms seeking global scale. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When governments subsidize specific industries to help firms achieve global competitive scale, that's strategic trade policy. Quick recall hook. Strategic trade equals strategic subsidies for strategic industries. 43. An economics professor explains that when a country allocates resources to produce more steel, it necessarily gives up the wine production those same resources could have generated. Which fundamental economic concept does this production trade-off illustrate? A. Absolute advantage principle. B. Factor endowment availability. C. Opportunity cost concept. D. Resource mobility assumption. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Opportunity cost concept. Explanation. Option C is correct because opportunity cost represents the cost of pursuing one activity at the expense of another activity, given that resources allocated to steel cannot simultaneously produce wine. Option A is incorrect because absolute advantage refers to being more efficient than others in production, rather than the trade-offs involved when allocating limited resources between alternative uses. Option B is incorrect because factor endowment refers to the availability of resources, like labour and land, rather than the trade-offs required when choosing between alternative production possibilities. Option D is incorrect because resource mobility assumes resources can move between industries, rather than describing the cost of foregone alternatives when resources are committed to one use. When a country allocates resources to produce more steel, it gives up the wine those same resources could have made. This is opportunity cost, the value of what you sacrifice when you choose one option over another. Resources are limited. Workers making steel aren't making wine. Land used for factories isn't growing grapes. Every choice has a cost measured in foregone alternatives. Absolute advantage is about being more efficient than others, a different concept. Factor endowment describes what resources you have available, not what you give up using them. Resource mobility assumes factors can move between uses, but doesn't describe the cost of choosing. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe giving up one product to produce another, that's opportunity cost. Quick recall hook: opportunity cost equals what you give up to get what you choose. 44. Political leaders advocate policies that would shield domestic manufacturers from foreign competition through import restrictions, while simultaneously supporting aggressive export promotion programs to expand sales abroad. Which general trade philosophy do these protective and promotional policies represent? A. Free trade philosophy. B. Protectionism philosophy. C. Laissez-faire approach. D. Comparative advantage approach. Do you know the answer? Correct answer: B. Protectionism philosophy. Explanation: Option B is correct because protectionism is the idea that governments should actively protect domestic industries from imports and vigorously promote exports rather than allowing free competition. Option A is incorrect because free trade advocates minimal government intervention and allows market forces to determine trade patterns rather than actively protecting domestic industries from imports. Option C is incorrect because laissez-faire represents a hands-off governmental approach rather than the active protection and promotion policies characteristic of protectionist trade philosophy. Option D is incorrect because comparative advantage is an economic theory explaining specialization benefits rather than a policy philosophy advocating import protection and export promotion. Political leaders want to shield domestic manufacturers from imports while aggressively promoting exports. Block foreign goods coming in, push domestic goods going out. This is protectionism, active government intervention to protect domestic industries and promote exports. It's the opposite of letting markets sort things out. Free trade says minimize intervention. Let comparative advantage guide trade flows. Laissez-faire means hands-off entirely. Comparative advantage is an economic theory explaining why specialization benefits everyone. It's not a policy stance advocating protection. The key combination is import restrictions plus export promotion. Classic protectionist playbook. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe blocking imports while promoting exports, that's protectionism. Quick recall hook: protectionism protects at home, promotes abroad. 45. Economists calculate that while import tariffs benefit domestic steel producers and generate government revenue, the overall national economy loses value because consumers pay higher prices and resources flow to less efficient domestic production. Which economic concept describes these net losses from trade barriers? A. Trade surplus gains. B. Factor endowment shifts. C. Comparative advantage gains. D. Deadweight cost losses. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer: D. Deadweight cost losses. Explanation: Option D is correct because deadweight cost represents the net losses that occur in an economy as a result of tariffs, reflecting inefficiency when protection diverts resources from more productive uses. Option A is incorrect because trade surplus gains represent benefits from exporting more than importing, rather than the economic losses resulting from tariff-induced inefficiencies and higher consumer prices. Option B is incorrect because factor endowment shifts describe changes in resource availability rather than the net economic losses resulting from protective tariffs that distort efficient resource allocation. Option C is incorrect because comparative advantage gains represent benefits from specialization rather than describing the economic losses that tariffs create through inefficient resource allocation. Tariffs help domestic steel producers and generate government revenue, but the overall economy loses value. Consumers pay higher prices. Resources flow to less efficient domestic production instead of more productive uses. These net losses are called deadweight costs, the economic value destroyed by trade barriers. Picture it this way. Tariffs transfer money from consumers to producers and government, but some value simply disappears in the process. That disappeared value is deadweight loss. Trade surplus gains are benefits from exporting more than importing. Factor endowment shifts describe resource changes. Comparative advantage gains come from specialization. None describe the destruction of economic value from tariffs. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe net economic losses from tariffs due to inefficiency and higher prices, that's deadweight cost. Quick recall hook. Deadweight cost equals value destroyed. Nobody gets it. 46. A telecommunications company launches aggressive price cuts in a competitor's most profitable regional market, not because that region is strategically important to the attacker, but to force the competitor to defend its core territory and divert resources from other battlegrounds. Which competitive attack type does this diversionary tactic represent? A. Feint attack approach. B. Thrust attack approach. C. Gambit attack approach. D. Blue ocean strategy. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Feint attack approach. Explanation. Option A is correct, because a feint is an attack on a focal arena, important to a competitor, but not the attacker's true target area, designed to divert competitor attention and resources. Option B is incorrect because a thrust represents a classic frontal attack with brute force on a genuinely targeted market, rather than a diversionary attack on a non-priority area. Option C is incorrect because a gambit involves withdrawing from a low-value market to attract rivals there while capturing a high-value market rather than attacking competitor core territories. Option D is incorrect because blue ocean strategy avoids attacking defended core markets entirely rather than launching diversionary attacks to drain competitor resources from other areas. A telecom company attacks a competitor's most profitable market, not because it wants that market, but to force the competitor to defend there and divert resources from other battles. This is a feint attack. In military terms, a feint draws enemy attention to one location while you strike somewhere else. The attacked market matters to the defender, not the attacker. It's strategic misdirection. A thrust is a direct frontal assault on a market you actually want. A gambit involves withdrawing from one market to lure rivals there while you grab a better one. Blue ocean strategy avoids contested markets entirely. The key is not strategically important to the attacker, pure diversion. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe attacking a competitor's important market as a diversion rather than a real target, that's a feint. Quick recall hook. Feint equals fake attack. Distract them over there. 47. Two airline companies compete in multiple city pair markets worldwide and have developed an implicit understanding where each refrains from aggressive price competition in routes dominated by the other, recognizing that attacks would trigger costly retaliation across their entire network. Which competitive dynamic concept describes this restraint pattern? A. Explicit collusion agreement. B. Cartel formation activity. C. Mutual forbearance behavior. D. Price leadership establishment. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Mutual forbearance behavior. Explanation. Option C is correct because mutual forbearance occurs when multi-market firms respect their rivals' spheres of influence in certain markets, and rivals reciprocate, leading to tacit competitive restraint. Option A is incorrect because explicit collusion involves direct negotiation of output and pricing agreements, rather than implicit restraint arising from recognition of multi-market competitive interdependence. Option B is incorrect because cartel formation involves formal organization for price fixing among multiple competitors, rather than implicit mutual restraint between two firms across multiple markets. Option D is incorrect because price leadership involves one firm setting prices that others follow, rather than reciprocal restraint, where each firm avoids attacking the other's dominant markets. Two airlines compete across many routes worldwide. Each avoids aggressive pricing in routes where the other dominates, knowing that attacks would trigger retaliation across their entire network. This implicit understanding is mutual forbearance. When companies meet in multiple markets, they develop an unspoken respect for each other's territory. Attack my profitable route and I'll attack yours, so neither attacks. It's competitive détente without explicit agreement. Explicit collusion requires actual negotiation and agreement. Cartel formation involves organized price fixing among multiple firms. Price leadership means one firm sets prices others follow. None describe the implicit restraint arising from multi-market contact. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When multi-market competitors implicitly avoid attacking each other's dominant territories, that's mutual forbearance. Quick recall hook. Mutual forbearance equals mutual respect for territories. You stay out, I stay out. 48. When analyzing competitive threats, strategists compare whether rival firms possess similar types and amounts of strategic assets such as technology portfolios, brand equity, and financial resources that could be deployed in competitive battles. Which competitor and analysis concept does this asset comparison represent? A. Market commonality assessment. B. First mover advantage analysis. C. Institutional distance measurement. D. Resource similarity evaluation. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, D. Resource similarity evaluation. Explanation. Option D is correct because resource similarity is the extent to which a given competitor possesses strategic endowment comparable in both type and amount to those of the focal firm. Option A is incorrect because market commonality measures the overlap between rivals' markets rather than comparing the strategic assets and capabilities that competitors possess for competitive battles. Option B is incorrect because first mover advantage analysis examines timing benefits rather than comparing the types and amounts of strategic resources that competing firms have available. Option C is incorrect because institutional distance measures differences between country regulatory and normative systems rather than comparing competitor resource portfolios and strategic asset holdings. Strategists analysing competitors compare strategic assets, technology portfolios, brand equity, financial resources. Do rivals have similar weapons for competitive battle? This comparison is resource similarity. It asks, how alike are our arsenals? Firms with similar resources can fight similar battles. Firms with different resources compete asymmetrically. Market commonality measures something different. Overlap in the markets where firms compete. First mover advantage analysis looks at timing benefits. Institutional distance measures differences between countries' regulatory systems. Only resource similarity compares the strategic assets competitors possess. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe comparing competitors' strategic assets like technology, brands, and financial resources, that's resource similarity. Quick recall hook. Resource similarity asks, do they have the same weapons we do? 49. Domestic steel producers petition the government for relief, claiming that foreign competitors are selling imported steel below production costs to drive American manufacturers out of business and later raise prices. Which trade remedy specifically addresses this alleged predatory foreign pricing behaviour? A. Import quota restrictions. B. Anti-dumping duty imposition. C. Voluntary export restraints. D. Administrative policy barriers. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, B. Anti-dumping duty imposition. Explanation. Option B is correct because anti-dumping duties are costs levied on imports that have been sold below costs to unfairly drive domestic firms out of business. Option A is incorrect because import quotas restrict the quantity of imports for specific periods, rather than specifically addressing predatory below-cost pricing by foreign competitors. Option C is incorrect because voluntary export restraints involve exporting countries agreeing to limit their own exports rather than penalising foreign firms for predatory pricing practices. Option D is incorrect because administrative policy barriers involve bureaucratic obstacles to importing rather than specifically targeting and penalising below-cost predatory pricing by foreign competitors. Domestic steel producers claim foreign competitors are selling below production costs to drive them out of business, then raise prices later. This predatory pricing is called dumping, and the remedy is anti-dumping duties, extra tariffs on goods sold below cost. The goal is eliminating unfair price competition, not limiting quantities or creating bureaucratic obstacles. Import quotas restrict how much can enter, regardless of price. Voluntary export restraints involve exporting countries limiting their own shipments. Administrative barriers are bureaucratic hurdles. Only anti-dumping duties specifically target below-cost predatory pricing. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe foreign goods sold below cost to destroy domestic competition, the remedy is anti-dumping duties. Quick recall hook. Dumping equals selling below cost. Anti-dumping duties are the cure. 50. Before launching a major price reduction, a company's CEO publicly announces capacity expansion plans and warns that the firm will aggressively defend its market position against any competitor contemplating entry into its core business segments. Which competitive communication method does this public announcement represent? A. Competitive signalling behaviour. B. Explicit collusion initiation. C. Tacit collusion arrangement. D. Cartel coordination activity. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Competitive signalling behaviour. Explanation. Option A is correct because signalling allows firms to communicate competitive intentions to rivals through public announcements and actions without direct negotiation or explicit coordination. Option B is incorrect because explicit collusion involves direct negotiation between competitors rather than public announcements intended to communicate competitive intentions and deter potential rivals. Option C is incorrect because tacit collusion involves indirect coordination of pricing through observed behaviour patterns rather than deliberate public announcements about competitive intentions. Option D is incorrect because cartel coordination involves organised price fixing among multiple competitors rather than individual firm announcements intended to signal competitive resolve to rivals. Before cutting prices, a CEO publicly announces capacity expansion and warns the company will aggressively defend its market position. This is competitive signalling, communicating intentions to rivals through public statements rather than direct contact. The message is clear: don't even think about entering our territory. Signalling lets competitors understand each other's resolve without sitting in a room together. Explicit collusion requires actual negotiation between competitors, illegal in most places. Tacit collusion involves coordination through observed behaviour patterns, not deliberate announcements. Cartel coordination is organised price fixing among multiple firms. Only signalling describes deliberate public communication of competitive intentions. Here's a WGU C211 OA exam tip for you. When questions describe public announcements about competitive intentions to deter rivals, that's competitive signalling. Quick recall hook. Signalling sends a message. We're watching, we're ready. You have reached the end of our first question set. For the free complete exam preparation, visit our website link in the description, where you find thousands more practice questions and comprehensive study guides. Thanks for studying with us today. See you in the next video.